Okay, great. Well, we have on the line Scott Oskins from Hexagon. Scott's joining us today to talk about Hexagon's participation at the AWP conference, and I'll also mention Hexagon's involved in the AWP Summit on Scalability happening October 10th, the day after the conference, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Joining Scott and I as well is Fernando Espana from ConstructX. Fernando is also acting as the day chair, one of two day chairs for the AWP conference, and we can talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment as well. I'm Steve Mantillo. I'm from Group ASI. We are the company that organizes the Advanced Work Packaging Conference and related events, such as the AWP Summits. The AWP conference is coming out October 8th and 9th to Houston, Texas. This is technically the 10th AWP conference. This conference started as the Workface Planning Conference in Calgary, Alberta, Canada back in 2009. And as the AWP model has grown and changed over the years, so too has the conference. It was first rebranded the AWP conference in alignment with the publication of the AWP model through CII back around 2013, 2014. And it's been in Houston ever since. We recently brought the AWP conference to London, England, the first overseas event this past May. And we brought an AWP event back to Alberta for the first time since 2014. This past May as well. We had both the AWP conference in London and an AWP summit in Edmonton. And the Edmonton event was aligned with the Construction Owners Association of Alberta Best Practices Conference. So I'll just talk a little bit about the conference from a historical view. As mentioned, this is kind of the 10th year of the conference, and the conference has always supported the advancement of project performance best practices with a focus on advanced work packaging. Advanced work packaging continues to pick up steam around the world, being driven by major project owners, of course, and the contractors that they work with and the providers of technologies and implementation support activities. It's something that you're going to find on projects all over North America, but it's happening in Southeast Asia, it's happening in Europe and the UK, it's happening in Brazil, Australia, pretty much everywhere you look. And it originally was designed to benefit projects in that multi-billion dollar scope, but with the introduction of a scalable AWP model over the past couple of years, project owners with projects valued at $100 million and under are starting to see ways that they can apply AWP for benefits to those smaller projects as well. So the AWP conference and the AWP summits that Group ASI puts on are developed in collaboration with industry advisory boards and development teams. It's basically an industry forum for discussion of what's happening now with AWP, what's coming up for AWP, and then how can we best interpret and apply the best practices for the benefit of industry at large. So it very much is a thought leadership forum and a way for all of the practitioners in industry doing AWP to put their heads together and really talk about how to make this all work. So with that in mind, Hexagon is actually a longtime supporter of the AWP conference. Hexagon being a provider of technologies and services that support and enhance advanced work packaging for their clients. And they're going to be involved in both of our upcoming fall events. We have, as mentioned, the AWP conference in Houston on October 8th and 9th, and a special one-day AWP summit focused on scalable advanced work packaging on October 10th. And we're going to be actually focusing on Hexagon's breakout session. They have a 1-hour breakout session in our technology track at the AWP conference. And Scott Oskins is the speaker for that presentation, and he's going to be diving into the topic of constraint management. So I'll let him introduce himself. Fernando as well is going to support that conversation. I'll let Fernando introduce himself. So why don't we, without further ado, Scott Oskins, you're the technical director for solution design with Hexagon, correct?
That's correct. I'm the product owner for Smart Construction.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about your background and with Hexagon, and as well, let us know kind of why you think AWP is important, and a little bit about its impact from a technology provider's standpoint, and where you think this is going.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. And first, I'd like to say thanks for inviting us and having the chance to speak here. And for all you guys are doing for the conference, it's a great thing to help move the industry forward. But as far as me, my name's Scott Oskins. Once again, I'm the product owner for Intergraph Smart Construction, one of the products, many products that Hexagon offers to the industry. I'm going to be speaking about constraint management in I'll say a more detailed fashion. So my background is, until I hired on with Hexagon as a product owner in 2017, my previous 22 plus years in the industry were in construction management, construction execution. So I bring with me a lot of industry experience, and I'll say what I'm going to speak about today is going to help hopefully bridge the gap between what's going on in the industry today relative to constraints, how things are working or not working today, and how we as a software provider can help move things forward and help out the industry as a whole with the specific topic of constraint management.
Excellent. And Fernando, you are a AWP subject matter expert in industry. You are the president of ConstructX, which is an AWP implementation support company. I mentioned the top of the presentation here that you are also acting as one of the 2 day chairs for the conference. For the benefit of the listeners, when you're introducing yourself, do you mind telling us a little bit more about your role as an advisor and day chair for the conference as well?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, thank you again, Steve, and I appreciate being a part of this and working with Scott. So yeah, ConstructX, we deliver AWP solutions, including these direct implementations to support owner-operators, EPCs, and key contractors. And our solutions also include technology integration and data management to support these AWP objectives, you know, of both project and portfolio customers. And this ties in keenly to the objectives of the AWP conference this year. You know, and I have a lot of practical experience in engineering and construction, but early on in my career, I saw these major gaps and challenges. You know, I started getting involved with production planning and control and leveraging 3D technologies when it was in its early years, and saw the value of that. And it was somewhat structured but unstructured. But I finally met Lloyd Rankin in 2005 and saw the missing link, and that was AWP frameworks that really could tie into this overall optimization effort that I was so interested in, and saw ways to really drive improvements in this industry. So with that in mind, you know, one of the key things that we're going to talk about for day one is data. Data is the key. And I think as we understand in this industry, the volumes of data need to be managed and managed effectively so people can make better and earlier decisions. And with that, I'm really looking forward to participating in day one, and also meeting everybody at the conference.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fernando, and we're honored to have you. Thank you for accepting our nomination, I guess you could say, to act as day chair. And Fernando will be helping to move the presentations forward throughout the course of one of the 2 days of the conference. And you can obviously feel free to chat with him at any time during the event and ask him your questions. Same with Scott. So I mentioned there would be a couple of different Hexagon presentations, Scott's breakout session. Darren Wellington, Technical Services Director, Smart Materials and Smart Construction for Hexagon, is going to be part of a 4-person panel led by Dow Chemical Company on the topic of construction-driven procurement in the plenary. So watch for that session as well. But we're going to get back to the breakout session here with Scott. Scott, you're going to be talking about a closer look into constraint management. That presentation is being described as the full value of implementing a comprehensive constraint management program is not always recognized. This session will take an in-depth look at constraint management from multiple aspects and make the case for having a detailed plan for managing constraints on projects. The discussion will focus on the overall benefits that constraint management provides toward the successful implementation of advanced work packaging and work-based planning processes, and additional benefits of greater project performance and excellence. So I'd like to pass it over to you now to talk in more detail about your session, what it's about, what attendees can expect to get out of that session, what some of the key takeaways are, and then we'll talk a little bit more about constraint management in general after that.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. So a few of the things, just to give you a sneak peek about what we'll be talking about at the conference is first of all, what is constraint management? What are we referring to with that? And I'll say the critical role that plays in work-based planning and advanced work packaging as a methodology as a whole. And I'll say without some form of constraint management or tracking, a good portion of the methodology falls apart or fails. So we'll take a good look at that as the value it holds within the methodology and what we're talking about and the whole purpose of the conference, but also a look at where the industry is today, how it handles it from that perspective, how manual the process might be today as a whole, for the industry as a whole, and then what we, Hexagon, can do as a software provider to help improve that process and help move that forward to help projects improve their cost and time schedule efficiencies. So, and then the broader context behind that is a look at the constraints, some of the major categories themselves. And what we look at in work-based planning and AWP is highly focused on the direct manpower and how we can maximize efficiency and increase their time on tools. This is also going to give some of the side effects or the other efficiencies that can be gained, which is on the indirect side. A lot of the major categories for constraints are on the indirect side. And if we can provide the industry more transparency and visibility as to what's going on with the indirects and provide information and data, that other whole piece of the project that consumes a large amount of money and time and effort and labor, we can save on that end. So that's the broader context I'm talking about. So I'm hoping people will come to the breakout session and we can get a closer look at that.
Okay, excellent. And so in regards to constraint management as a concept, how important is that in the AWP, to an AWP system? I mean, is it a critical topic?
I think I think Fernando will definitely agree to this. It sits right in the middle of it, Steve. Without clearing constraints, and this is a critical portion of work-based planning, which is a big piece of advanced work packaging methodology. The cardinal rule is you need to mitigate or remove the constraints before the work commences. And we're talking about a whole host of potential constraints. Could be scaffolding, equipment, lifting devices, cranes, access, could be drawings, a whole host of things. And the whole goal is to mitigate those constraints, to increase the time. So when you launch the work, all of that is pre-planned. It's been dispositioned and mitigated ahead of time, and that, in effect, should maximize or help improve the efficiency of your crews as they work.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the slogan for work-based planning in the early 2000s when it was first released as a COA best practice, and it was all about getting the right things to the right people at the right time. And I guess underlying that message is good constraint management, right? That's kind of the fundamental principle there.
Absolutely, that's correct.
So, do you have any questions or comments for Scott, Fernando?
Yeah, I also will make some comments here because tools like Scott's talking about here with Hexagon and SPC, are absolute enablers, and Scott's right on all his points to really drive great processes in constraint management. But one thing as an industry, we embrace these key concepts and we talk about them, planning, and we need to get to an optimized path of construction, a path of engineering, or a path of fabrication. Those are really great little concepts. But really the success depends on the level of understanding of the implications of this and the effort and focus required. However, not always easy to achieve, and we're not perfect. Well, it's in everybody's best interest that constraint management is a key focus on this. We want to prevent poorly planned work, whether it's engineering, construction, or procurement, from moving downstream to our work-based planners and eventually to our general foreman and foremen that have to execute the work. All right, so we all, I'm sure everybody on that's going to hear this, know the consequences all too well if we fail in that. So constraint management, what Scott is saying, really enables two conditions to be addressed. One is readiness. How do we make work ready? Whether, ready for future planning and execution, planning by the work-based planners, planning by, by the foreman and general foreman to go execute work. These are key things. In AWP, it is our work packages really, whether it's engineering, construction work packages, and the execution against IWPs. That's what it looks like for us. Requires significant efforts of collaboration, coordination, and commitment to deliver. Right. The other point that constraint management will really enable us to do, and why we need tools to do this, is it helps us discover the issues. We can look for these duplications of efforts, conflicts, and gaps, which are the worst part. The gaps between our engineering deliverables and our field deliverables, and whether or not we've identified a proper constraint. Right. So, and along with that, the visualization tools that support that and enable us to easily see these issues. So what is good constraint management? It requires a familiar combination of, and we hear it all the time, people, process, technology, and I'm going to add the fourth, culture. So proactive efforts, trained resources to perform this, enabling tools to shift those resources. And I know that Scott mentioned this earlier, to more high value activities. If you're sitting there doing manual efforts and things, and your work-based planners are spending hours and hours doing that rather than removing constraints, it's not a high value effort. And people are going to say, well, gee, you're filling out an Excel spreadsheet? Wow. And then who's going to read that? Who's going to interpret that? Robust processes in place, including well-defined and established roles and responsibilities. Processes the place, to really enable people to coordinate, integrate plans, and produce their deliverables, whether they're in construction, engineering, or elsewhere. And I'll go to the culture that views the project as a whole and makes serious investments, commitments to collaborate, coordinate, and produce these deliverables, including defining the proper handoffs between parties that are interdependent or directly interfacing with each other. And you got to have the right tools in place to do that. There's just no question. Doing this all manually is currently an industry challenge. I know Scott just mentioned that. And I think, Scott, you probably can speak to those points. And with Hexagon's tools, and a lot of folks out there are leveraging these tools all the way from engineering through construction with SPC and final commissioning. But I believe that if we're not seriously considering these types of tools integrated with a multi-tool environment, for sure, but you're not going to get the value out of the projects that you expect it to get. So with all that, I'll let Scott kind of respond, because I think you have a lot to say and contribute to this.
Sure, Fernando. A few things. Yes, with culture, you're exactly right with that. And I would say, as a software provider, we're very sensitive to the culture. And what I look at for what we bring to the table, what we want to do is analyze what the workers and what the field folks are physically doing today in a very manual way. And we don't want to add to that. We simply want to complement that or make it more efficient, or provide them more information in front of them to make decisions and be more efficient about their work. So we're very sensitive to that as far as the culture goes. We don't want to add to the process. We want to increase the efficiency. And so in essence, take existing very manual processes, and I'll say my viewpoint, and I'll say it to the industry as a whole, is we have these tools like Smart Construction that's very well handles the work packaging. It even helps the planners, allows them today, I'll say, to identify the constraints. And for when they identify them, for the most part, it kind of still falls off the cliff to that manual environment where, okay, if I need a scaffold, if I need a crane, if I need specialty tools, it still goes into that manual mode where you have human-to-human interaction. And I don't want to, that's a good thing, and we don't want that to stop, but it's very manual. There's no tracking. It's not in an integrated environment to where the rest of the project, you have visibility to what's going on, whether it's happening or not happening. You rely on those manual processes to take effect. And what I'd say is on the back end, what happens many times is even though a planner goes in and plans a package and very diligently tries to identify the constraints and thinks many times the constraints are cleared, what you'll see in the field is once they fall into this manual process of human-to-human interaction without a whole lot of transparency or tracking or managing of that process, things still fall flat and they still fail. And what I'd say is in the midst of all of these constraints and all of these things and millions of components being installed, humans, without the help of regimented processes, and I'd say that's where we come in as a technology provider, where we can help move this forward and provide all that information, provide an interface to where you can see it in an integrated environment relative to the whole, prioritize it, and also have validations that in fact it's done and not rely just on humans communicating back and forth whether it's done or not. You actually have systems tracking that and helping you manage it. And lastly, what I would say is we're venturing into that space. Our next release of Smart Construction, which is going to be coming out in the next 4 to 6 weeks, is taking that big step into constraint management. So we look forward to that.
Yeah, and I want to add something to that because you mentioned some key things, and going back to this culture, I think because of day one is really going to focus on data. I think when you get your data, working for you, and using the right tools, it gets the information to the people that makes better decisions. They see things, they visualize, they can interact with the project in very different ways. That it drives culture change, right? So if I can see the work I'm going to go do, I can absorb a lot of information quickly, and I become a believer in what we're doing as an industry or on a project or even when I'm getting ready to go execute an IWP. It just changes behaviors and drives people into the right frame of mind to go be more efficient and more effective in the execution of their work or the production of their deliverables. So I'm a big believer in how data and tools enable that, because it's really the people, the process that really has to be robust to drive success. So I'm really looking forward to joining your breakout and really seeing how things are going to go in the future and where Hexagon is going to be contributing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that conversation, guys. As I'm taking some notes here, you touched on a lot of really, really important stuff. And to me, it sounds like one of the primary challenges as far as constraint management is concerned is currently the manual nature of the processes and the lack of monitoring and mitigation support by good data and good structured processes. And probably one of the key ways to start thinking about improving constraint management is being more proactive, getting more granularity, more visibility for accountability for important constraints. Scaffolding comes to mind. As a sort of a quick takeaway from this conversation, what would you say are maybe the top 2 or 3 sort of key challenges to effective constraint management, and maybe the top 2 or 3 recommendations from your perspective, just sort of in summary to what you just discussed?
Well, I'll go first, Fernando. You already
Yeah.
mentioned it. I believe the first thing that comes to mind for me is culture, and we spent a lot of time covering that. Um, is you know the industry has been operating in manual mode, and also and I'm talking specifically constraints, but they've been doing a lot of other things in manual mode, and it's just a resistance to change. So, like I said, the challenge for us as a software provider is to try and capture what they're doing manually and provide an interface for that, and not without adding more work or more details to the process. It's capturing what they're doing, providing an interface, and helping make it more transparent, and also placing that into an integrated environment where they get much more value. The project as a whole, not just the individuals who are logging and managing the constraints, but for let's say management professionals, that provides them with information they have not had before to allow them to make the decisions they need to make to help these projects become successful. That's the first challenge. The second challenge is I'll say on our side as a software provider, and that is how do we hit the mark with the construction industry so that we're perceived as helping improve the process, like I said, and then this falls in with the cultural change. So we're very sensitive to that. So we look forward to things moving forward. So those to me are the biggest challenges. What do you see, Fernando?
Yeah, I definitely will support those, and I think from my perspective, and we talk about planning and we talk about getting it right in the very beginning. My sense is that we as an industry get that, but we don't spend enough time really getting to good planning and what the implications of a path of construction really has to a path of engineering. And I think more people need to be engaged and think through the entire process to really come up with good plans. And the more we do that, I think the better off we'll be. I believe the other major constraint is, what does readiness really mean? How are we really focusing on CWP readiness, or getting our engineering work packaging efforts really humming so that we can deliver to the CWPs and all the other readiness conditions that really help that. So I think readiness activities will really move our industry forward. Training for those resources, and new resources, and making sure that our project teams are on board, I think is another key thing. It's becoming a more, I think, centralized topic in our, in discussions around AWP, that this is really key, but we need to get people up and running because resources are scarce and we need to bring on new people all the time. And that is an industry challenge. So data will support all that. And I think we need to get our systems and the right investments, the right thinking in place. So we put that combination of technologies together to suit the project, to suit our portfolios, right, and really drive these better planning and opportunities, and really get down to a point where when we execute, we are executing against a very robust and well thought through plan.
Excellent. Well, to anyone listening to this session, I hope you found these points insightful and helpful, and I hope you've taken something away from this conversation. I guarantee you'll take a lot more away from attending the AWP conference and the AWP Summit on Scalability. I'm sure as well you have your own list of challenges and priorities in regards to AWP and specifically constraint management. So I strongly recommend coming to check out Scott in the Hexagon presentation, looking deeper into constraint management in the technology track. That'll be happening on the first day of the conference, October 8th, from 2 to 3. And on the following day, October 9th, from 2 to 3 as well, Hexagon will be on the plenary talking about construction-driven procurement. And so, yeah, I think with that, we'll just encourage everyone to check out awpconference.com, awpsummit.com. Right now, if you register for the AWP conference, you will also be eligible for complimentary admission into the AWP Summit. So make it a full 3 days. Learn all about AWP, all the important topics of the day. Fernando mentioned the theme of data, touching on a lot of the material for the conference. Overall, the conference theme for this year is focused on taking advanced work packaging from concept to reality. So really making it work for you and your specific project challenges and priorities. We're going to focus on building the AWP business case, defining the value proposition, and talking about data, tools, integrating those things, the critical nature of good data, and overall just really focusing in much more detail probably than we have in past years about how to use AWP. It's all about how to use this, how to make it work. So don't miss Hexagon at the conference and at the summit. They will be involved in the Southern company-led team focusing on complex, repetitive projects in the summit. So any further questions, comments from either Scott or Fernando at this time? Scott, maybe you go first.
No, I'm good. Thanks once again for allowing me to speak, and I look forward to the conference. If anyone's listening can make it, as Stephen said, I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak about this critical topic. Thank you.
And Fernando?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I believe this is a very, very important topic to keep at the forefront of everybody, and I look forward to the conference and meeting up with all those that are attending.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for joining. We went a little longer than we expected, but again, I hope everyone listening has found this interesting and valuable. So we'll see you in Houston in a couple of weeks. Thanks, guys.